Georgia versus Fiji, the Lelos versus the Flying Fijians. When last we previewed it, we billed it as rugby's ultimate clash of styles, and it definitely is. It is the Tier 2 answer to All Black Springboks. It's just a fantastic game whenever they take the field, because they are two up-and-coming sides, two sides for whom it's their national sport. They live and breathe it, but two sides who couldn't be more diametrically opposed in how they approach the game in terms of from their fundamentals onwards. Their work-ons are completely different, their styles completely different, but they are two great Tier 2 sides with a great tradition in the game, and it is just exciting to see them meet more and more often in these kinds of games. It's going to be in a neutral ground. It's in Spain, I believe, Aruña's Estadio de Deleite.
That's right. Aruña is just a suburb in the south of Madrid.
Yes,
part of the metropolitan area, I guess, but it's a little area of about 60,000 seats. It's kind of a weird place to have the game. It's a ways off the centre of Madrid, but hopefully I'm going to assume that there's a decent rugby bubble around there and that they're going to get good bums on seats, because Spanish rugby is being treated to quite a test here that they get to put on. I'm not quite sure why it's in Spain, but it is, and hopefully it's a good show, and the crowd get out and support it, because this is a good one.
I hope so. Yeah, no, definitely. Saturday as well, Super Saturday comes thick and fast. This one's a 3:30 kickoff local time, which is 2:30 GMT, it's going to be reffed by James Dolman of New Zealand, with Ben O'Keefe of New Zealand and Gianluca Necchi of Italy on the sidelines, with Stefano Penne of Italy also in the TMO box. 2 Kiwis, 2 Italians in it. They couldn't get a Frenchman or anything to ref Georgia. No.
Yeah, the Georgians wouldn't be a huge fan of the Kiwi refs, I wouldn't have thought, but probably better than an Aussie ref in this instance.
A little better than an Aussie ref, but I think it's still slight. If you're going to take anything from the referee appointment, I think slight advantage Fiji in terms of, he'll want to play on, he'll want to say don't disrupt the halfback, he'll like say
Fiji ball a little more than he likes Georgia ball, perhaps. You're not wrong in the sense that you say this is a true clash of styles. However, both of these sides have come a lot closer to the other than they would have been during that last billing, when it was the true clash of styles, when it was slow, deliberate, scrummaging Georgia, who wanted to spend 10 minutes scoring a try and wear you down while doing it, and fast Fiji, who could score from everywhere but were perhaps a little loose on the inside.
We've seen Fiji in the tight are much better than they were. Their defensive acumen improved, their scrummaging acumen, their maul acumen, all better than it was that day perhaps, and in that tournament. And Georgia found themselves some nice new backs, guys like Niniashvili out wide, in Tato Abzandadze they have a guy who's maturing day by day in the top 14 as well, really good 10. It's actually now, all of the battle of two of the better 10s you'll see in Tier 2 rugby. Obviously Aj McGinty for the US when you see him out there, but Ben Volavola and Tato Abzandadze, two really good level 10s in this one, which is unusual for a Tier 2 clash.
Yeah, it's going to be a very intriguing game. Both of these sides have developed their game since we last saw them meet, and it's definitely, I think you'd make Fiji favourites on the evidence of what happened last week. They blew away a Tier 1 side for most of that game, and were very unlucky to find themselves 15 points adrift by the end. It was discipline only that kept Wales in that game.
True, and both of them are coming off performances where discipline will be a big talking point for each of them in the thing, because it did cost them dearly in games that they were both competitive in. Like Georgia were mixing it with France very well in the middle third and in large periods of that game, and they grabbed a nice try too. And just in terms of the history of this clash, as we build it, the ultimate clash of styles, it's only happened 4 times. We need to see more of these games. Fiji hold a 3-1 winning record overall. Their first meeting was in Tbilisi in 2012. Fiji won that one 24-19. Second was in Suva, and the Lelos won that one 14-3. The last 2 meetings between the PNC and the World Cup as well are Fiji wins. Fiji have been
PNC, and they played in the
Automation Cup.
It's
it's now 4-1 for Fiji in favour of it, and momentum has been good for them. They have been notching up wins where in France last time Georgia will feel aggrieved and did feel aggrieved at the referee. We saw a couple of years ago Fiji rock up to Paris and do a number on France. So Fiji probably a little bit ahead of Georgia in their development. Like Fiji arguably in Tier 1 level already in terms of calibre.
Near enough, they pretty much are. They sometimes just their own mentality and their own mistakes can hold them back when they are a team that can well mix it in the physical and talent pools. From Georgia's point of view, obviously, they're at a nice place, I think, mentality wise. I think we had called for a shift when they play this sort of the bigger teams to not be, you know, too respectful,
too deferent.
Yeah, exactly. Not be reactive and be proactive and look to take the game to their opposition. And they have certainly dialed in that, and they've also dialed in a more rounded game. I think they're becoming students of the game over there. They do obsess over it and love it. And if you search around, you can see like Georgian language YouTube shows not dissimilar to ours going out talking about the game. I mean, it is their national sport, and they've had to do some reflecting on whether their natural talents of the sort of wrestling and the old school Lelos is going to be enough in this game to mix with it. And I think they know that it's not. They needed to develop a kicking game. They needed to be more proactive on the defensive end.
More speed.
They needed more
line.
speed, exactly. They needed to move the ball and add all sorts of elements and strings to their bow. And they've done a wonderful job, really, in the last couple of years. You talk about teams that have kicked on since the World Cup.
Georgia's one.
Georgia, yes, certainly one of the more impressive out there. They were all over the place at the World Cup. They were one-dimensional. They were slow. They were defensively reactive.
They were physical with the ball and not so physical without the ball, which was a very frustrating watch when you look at the massive men they were. They were doing soft hits and stuff, and ultimately they got torn apart by Fiji when that fixture came around.
And they did lose heavily last year to Fiji, and they still get a little shocked by the level of physicality, as we talked about with the Tonga-Romania game, the pop that Fiji put into those shots and those contacts. The Georgian backs particularly don't deal with that well, but in the last year we've seen them develop a very good defence. We saw them in moments against France go through sets of multiple phases, maintaining their width, getting out of the line, being disciplined enough, and then making tackles, although it's important to note that virtually every one of those sets ended in a penalty against them, harshly or unharshly. Like when they go for a jacko, they'd be called. They'll have to be dialed into the refereeing. Whether it's unfair or not, they cannot allow themselves to be in that situation where they get whistled off the park. They have to take just a little step off their defence. They're not a major blitzing team anyway. They're a contact and then soak and then slow up and then contest the ball team. They'll have to do that with a bit more discipline, but primarily stepping up on defence, maintaining their width, and then making their one-on-one tackles and winning their one-on-one matchups is going to be huge. Kavessa Ladza at 13, huge job against Nayakaleva.
Yeah, he was brilliant in the Autumn Nations Cup last year, but he's kind of stalled a little bit in terms of form since then at 13, but they do have other resources there. More proactive D is what they'll definitely need in terms of their Fiji matchup and the more recent history in that game. Can't be standoffish, need to kind of get up in the face, need to tackle man and ball, be physical in all of those contacts. It starts with defence, because like if you can't defend them, they will find themselves at a loss for score. Keeping pace with Fiji in a shootout is just a no-go, so the defence has to be a primary factor. So too the set piece. They were unable in the World Cup to make their scrum count. Their scrum didn't actually do as well in the World Cup as it had done traditionally. It is a traditional strength of theirs. Fiji have improved in that area themselves, and they're massive men. It will be tough, especially with a Kiwi ref who will be telling them to use it every time it gets to the back regardless. But they should be trying to edge that set piece.
They'll get some honest reward if they do scrummage well. What I will say is that the backup props of Gogachashvili and Japaridze last week, who came on, did win comfortably the battle against the French replacements, which is not easy. The French do scrummage. Cyril Bai now, he did a job on Melakidze. Melakidze was conceding pens at that scrum. He had a rough day of it. But in the second half, Georgia were winning scrums and they were moving backwards against a good French scrum. That's positive, and I wonder if they might go for that combination to start the game. I would hope that we don't have the squads as we are now, but I would hope that they'd be involved significantly in the game in some way. Because you're right, they will need the set piece edge. They will.
It's need the line out maul to be working as well, because Fiji couldn't defend Wales's line out maul last week, and Georgia have a very effective maul when they get the line out right. They need to kind of branch it better last week. It has. They've been bold in terms of going for things like going to jump at 3 and stuff, where that was what was one of the lessons they learned, not just in the World Cup but the Autumn Nations Cup, was like, if you're going to maul, don't slowly walk up to the 5 metre line and telegraph that you're going to jump at 2 and allow Woki or whomever, anyone, to just pinch it very easily off you by being that telegraphed and that slow. And they have mixed it up. There's more deception to their line out now, and they can kind of set up mauls from different angles. That will be an in for them. I did see Vern Cotter, Fiji coach, kind of reporting in from overseas. Obviously he's still way back in Fiji, but he was still checking in on their progress and suggesting what he might expect from Georgia, saying that the last time out they tried to kind of run at them, try and go gung-ho.
That's right.
And that they will probably learn those lessons and go back to a tighter game plan. That's certainly what Fiji are expecting from Georgia. I think that will be the first port of call, but ultimately you do want to find guys like Kvesaladze in a bit of space. Guys like Niniashvili need to get some time on the ball.
Tighter doesn't necessarily need to be, slow and one-dimensional.
No.
Like we saw last week, one of their most promising offensive sets, the one that ended in the Lobson Dadza try, was pretty dynamic, and it had good involvement from Sharakadze, and it's kind of on Tato and Lobson Dadza to make sure that their runners have multiple options to them. Becca Gorgadze was giving a lovely tip-on pass. He was tipping on nearly everything.
Some of the footballing qualities of him specifically, but their back row forwards are great.
They had good misdirection as to where the ball were going, and actually once or twice Gorgadze, because the French defence were starting to dial in, hey, this guy's tipping the ball on every time. You'd love to see him tuck and run, and they do need to mix that in. But the little options, the forwards running off one another, trying to overload the Fijian defence, and basically not allowing the Fijians to line up a tackle and smash you, but instead kind of catching them on the edge, winning little contacts on the inside, then Sharakadze picking a hard line on the inside, gaining those inroads in kind of the middle in those bust-up plays needs to be in large part what their offence is, checking the Fijian line speed and giving a little more space to Tato, and then he can kind of read the game and see what he sees, whether it's time to punt the ball long or what you want to do.
Certainly don't want to snap it out wide too quickly, because Nike Levu was defending like a monster again with
the
14
Wales could not get to the
Wales.
edge against
them. They couldn't. So guys
against
like
14 of them.
Yeah, guys like Kvesaladze might be frozen out a little bit. Like you'll have to be, the timing has to be absolutely right, and they have to be sat down with a few hard-earned yards before you can even think about going as wide as that. But ultimately, you do want to get Niniashvili involved, and you do want to try and execute on the wings once that hard graft is done.
Tabatsadze, not getting too many headlines, but scoring tries routinely.
Good tries. This is it. Find him on the edge if they can earn it. They can try and squeeze some points out of them over there. But it's a big ask for these Georgians, and it's one that they will be targeting as far as a game, because they feel like they are on a level to compete with Fiji. It's just unfortunate that when
Fiji
they
are taking it up a level themselves.
The other thing is when Georgia play their best game possible, it'll still probably be a bit of a scrap with Fiji ultimately, just given the nature of their team, whereas when Fiji play well and Georgia are a bit off the pace, the score will blow out, and that's the way it is, just by style.
I guess they're kind of hoping as well on the other side of the spectrum that they meet, there is the schizophrenic nature of Fiji, they're hoping they meet the Fiji that played in Spain the last time, that rocked up to Madrid a little dialed out and went 10-0 down and wasn't even paying attention, as opposed to the very dialed in, we're going to catch you Wales Fiji that played last weekend, where they were just awesome. That's definitely there's definitely a luck element to what Fiji you do get, and from Fiji's point of view, I think they do feel an air of confidence in this game.
They should. The recent record has been good. It was tight in the early goings of 12 through 16 when these teams were meeting, but in the years since, Fiji have kicked on to another level seemingly, and Georgia are holding on to their coattails and trying to come along with them. They're both progressing. But Fiji look really good and looked really, really good last week, and it's their physical, the fact that they have the innate power to not be shocked, not only not be shocked, but to actually shock the Georgians themselves, just gives them that edge whereby they can back their ball skills to get them over the line, even in a stuttery stop-start performance if the ball bounces. It's kind of not dissimilar to what you saw Ireland v the All Blacks, in that for the Irish to win, they had to put in an 80-minute showing of such accuracy and such ferocity, and yet when the ball did break, it was try time for the other side, and that could be a dynamic here of a lot of huff and puff from Georgia. They want to soak it, they want to put pressure on with their blitz and their aggressive line speed that they've developed, generate a turnover and then go. Transition play is just what killed them in the World Cup game, particularly, was just that transition play. They were able to swallow them up with their defence and then pounce on the counter.
Caught them on the edge off things like restarts as well, when the Georgians were just begging for a ruck to happen, and Fiji were like, I don't know, let's see maybe there's something over here.
I think Radradra's over there.
They don't have a Radradra this time, but they do have the likes of Tui Sova, very, very exciting players. Tui Sui I thought was great on the weekend, and Tui Suvu, the fullback. What about that little play that he did, setting up the try for Nayaka Levu? They've got some wonderful ballers,
great quality,
and some good halfbacks who are leading them well.
Lomani and Volvo are playing. They played a brilliant game in Cardiff. They completely outmanaged the game on the Welsh halfbacks. It was just for those cards that otherwise they would have put in a winning showing, and just their strength in the contact zone was so encouraging. Both in not just last week, but in general against tier 1 teams, they've looked good in the contact in recent times.
It might be true that Georgia would have won the contacts against that Wales team as well.
Might have been.
This is probably a more physical Georgian team than the Wales team that played last week.
Certainly, whatever pitch that they took to. Yes, that was true.
Yeah, it's from Fiji's point of view, you're absolutely right. If they can front up, if they can not give the Georgians the ins at the set piece that they're looking for, they'll fancy winning this game. They'll think they'll have more strings to their bow, and they'll fancy their defense to take. Like it's a more positive offense than they have had, and they do have to be mindful of the footwork that Sharp Kads is putting in, and also just the quality of the back rowers, of course, the dynamism of those guys. It is a challenge to stop them.
The danger is getting outworked. If you turn up lazy and like when you see a fighter lose a fight from just being outworked and not throwing punches properly, and just kind of plodding around the ring, they are guilty of some of that sometimes when they just are dialed out. But they will still be confident, even if they go down or things don't go their way for a period of possession, that their purple patches will count a lot more on the scoreboard than Georgia's purple patches, which tends to have been how this game has played out. Georgia do kind of mix it with them, even in those blowout games, kind of get some stuff off for a little bit, but haven't thus far been able to execute well enough on the backside of it to put scores on the board. And when it gets a little loose out wide and turnover happens, Fiji just make them pay.
Although I'm going to say,
go on,
from my prediction point of view, I'm going to say that this Georgian team is better at executing than any Georgian team that has come before.
That's true.
And hence they do find tries, and maybe they do find a Fiji team that's not quite at the same pitch that they were last week, and that they do turn them over. I'm going to say, back in the Georgians. I think it'll be a good game. I think there'll be Fiji tries. I think there'll be Georgia tries. And I'll say it's going to be an absolute barn burner. Game of the weekend, 25-22 to the Georgians in the end. That's home.
That's a great old game.
I'm in their corner, Shane. Somebody needs to be. I am.
Yeah. I'm thinking closer, somewhere in the range of 38-20.
That's the same game they played last time. That's the same score as the game they played in the All Nations Cup, 38-24.
Well, that's probably why I'm thinking it.
Get out of here with that. That's a terrible call.
Okay,
you can't just say the same.
I'll say 40-20, a 20-point win for Fiji in a good game.
The Georgians will never concede 40 again, Shane. That is the last time against France. That's the last time it's going to happen.
I would hope that is true. And to be fair, it can go either way. I can see it going away. One of the swaying factors is the fact that Dolman is the man with the whistle. I think we're seeing a lot with South Africa complaining about refs and all Razzygate and stuff, and
no one gets harsher treatment than Georgia.
No one gets harsher treatment than Georgia, but they get the harsh treatment for the same reasons that South Africa. Not entirely. There are other things with South Africa, obviously, but the primary reason that a ref will seemingly get on top of you in a game isn't necessarily bias against your country or anything like that. It's generally a rugby based thing. Like if a wallaby's looking at you, putting your hands in every ruck or scragging a 9, they'll pin you for it. Like they don't like teams that want to slow it down and make it physical, which is what Georgia do. And as such, which is why I'd love to see a French ref their game, because he would at least look at the scrum. We watched it all last week when they got a dominant scrum. Either the wallaby or the Kiwi or the Aussie with the whistle was just saying use it or pinning them. And I'm sure this weekend Dolman will be the same. I think anytime a ball's at the back, even if the scrum is being monstered, it'll just be use it. The ball's there, use it.
It might be the case that Georgia, to be truly competitive, just need one or two edges, and they're not you want to see them play at home with a ref that's not that way inclined. They seem to always have the Southern Hemisphere refs. Whereas with a good Northern Hemisphere ref, and then a game at home in Georgia that might tip the scales enough to make them truly competitive and maybe pull off a win. But as it is, you're probably right on the balance that Fiji will win, but I'm still thinking Georgia. You're going
to give Georgia the punt. I think it's, as you said, a great game. Who do you got? Let us know down below who's going to win this ultimate clash of styles as we bill it between two of our favourite Tier 2 teams that are fast coming, closing the gap on behalf of Tier 2 with the rest of Tier 1, and kind of dragging the rest with them, being an example for either kind of mould. You can kind of emulate Fiji in your progressions, you can emulate Georgia in your progressions, but they are flying a flag in Tier 2, so it's great to see that contest happen again.
No question. With that, we're going to move on.
Thank you very much for watching that video. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when we upload again. But mainly, please drop a comment down below. We enjoy hearing your thoughts on it. Thanks.